Hey everyone, Andrew with Andrew's Air-Cooled Technology. I wanted to do a quick video on where I am in the front suspension that I've been working on. And right now, we've got the kind of bulkhead put together, redone the upper and lower control arms, slightly modified spindle design, and we're just about there, exactly where we want it. Plenty of wheel travel. More than the stock suspension. I'm going to leave it right here, but most likely I'm going to put a stop in the suspension to prevent it from going too far down and hitting the ball joint on its on its edge there. But spindle's almost exactly right. A couple of modifications for that to get the camber exactly where I want it. All the components look really good, so I think we're really in good shape. We had a clearance issue with the tab that supports the brake line up here, and I know how to do. That's one of the changes we're going to make on a spindle, so I can get some more clearance here on the lower control arm, so it's not in the way of that tab, and that tab will just sit up the way it's supposed to without any issues. And things that are missing from this is hole in the front for access to your shift rod. That'll come. That's already in my CAD design, but when I made this, I didn't have it in there because it really didn't matter for what I'm doing. As you can see here, also I'll raise this up a little bit. Here's the steering knuckle. The placement of this is probably will very likely change. Based on putting the rack here, I'm going to get a rack and we'll bolt a rack in place here and kind of see how things line up, and look at tie rods and make up some tie rods and check for bump steer in this whole geometry. That's kind of one of my next things, as well as seeing how the shock fits in here and what kind of shock that I really need. How long, how much travel in the shock, etc. I already took some measurements off some shocks that I have. That I can use here in prototyping, some Fox shocks, coilovers. These upper and lower control arms should give enough room clearance for the shock to be in here. Although I'm guessing right now the shock I have might be too long, but that's what we're going to find out. And because we want to keep this pretty compact, as compact as we can keep it. Other things we're going to add is some triangulation right here to these control arm supports. Back to this bulkhead here, triangulation, and then across here, right here. In fact, this is now raised up. You kind of see my original design had holes here and here, which is lower, and so I put holes lower to raise this about 15 millimeters, and I got all the clearance that I needed. And then you can kind of see that basically this fits across here without hitting this at all, so we'll definitely be able to do that. And we'll get triangulation on these things and a cross brace, and that should really give us a really sturdy setup that won't bend and flex as you drive down the road, at least in theory. We'll find out as we test it whether it'll be good enough and whether I have to add any additional support. If I have to add any additional support, I kind of know how I would go about doing that, but I don't think I will. And so far, because of the way things are coming out, I'm not anticipating any real modification to like the frame head, any modification you're going to have to do anywhere here to bolt this thing on. So that's good too. So far so good in terms of it really being a bolt-on installation. One of the trickiest parts is going to be the steering rack, in terms of that, and we've got a shock here and we've got a steering rack, and so exactly how all that's going to tie together is going to be interesting, but that's one of the things we're going to tackle. And one thing that I wanted to part with here is a question for you guys. If you guys know, before you look at your cars, it'd be great. The thing that I noticed on these frame head, on this frame head, I have it kind of jacked up in the front a little bit with these from my welding table, so that this plate, this bulkhead, will actually be, parallel to the ground. if I just lay this thing flat on the welding table, it's actually tilted forward. And so you end up with, that's kind of like a negative caster situation. I don't notice that on my 73 that's back there, but that 73 is highly modified. In fact, I cut off the ball joint frame head on it and welded in a link pin frame head because we converted that to a Baja Bug. It's got a big 6-inch wider than stock beam on it. So generally speaking, that one's actually tilted back slightly, but I don't know if that's because of my modifications or whether it's because that's the way they really are for the most part. I know that the suspension, stock beam suspension, it travels in an arc, right? So definitely the frame head travels like this for the arc of the suspension, right? As the suspension compresses, that's going to dive forward, and that thing's going to lean forward a little bit. As it decompresses, it's going to get to straight, potentially be positive as well, but a positive angle in relation to caster anyway. So if you guys look at your car, post in the comments, it'd be great. I'd love to hear from somebody that has a pre-66 and someone that has a 66 and later, to see what you see at ride, especially just at ride height. The design really needs to be sitting kind of sit in that center of typical ride height. So of course, if you've got your car way lowered and you haven't done anything to modify caster, you're going to see it leaning forward. If you've got your car sitting at a pretty stock ride height, then that's really the information I need. If your car is raised up like that Baja Bug, you're going to see probably what I see, which is I got a positive angle going where the top is actually angled towards the back of the car, right? So like a positive caster angle. So that's one thing I don't know. Everything else I think we've got pretty much handled and know how to deal with the issues that are kind of cropping up as I fit this and get everything kind of dimensionally right. So we're in good shape there. So if you know, or if you can look at your cars, I'd really appreciate any information. I'm not really finding anything online. There's certainly no documentation on any of this kind of stuff. So just looking at cars, and I have a 66 Karmann Ghia with the ball joint as well, but it's kind of car's pretty much all torn apart, and it doesn't have the normal beam suspension on it already. So so in that particular case, it doesn't help me much to look at it to see what's going on, because it doesn't have the stock components on it. It's not sitting at a stock ride height, so I'm not really sure if it tells me much. So yeah, if you guys can tell me, that'd be great, and look forward to any comments. And if you got other questions on kind of what we're gonna do here as we kind of keep moving forward, just put them in the comments, and I'll answer everything that I can. Thanks. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.